All right. So today, until now, what all we have seen is we first saw the architecture of the database, what all components are there. Then we found out that there are some memory related components and some database physical files, logical files, and everything. In that, we saw that we had redo logs, archive redo logs, control file, parameter file, data files, all those files which were part of the database. So we saw how to manage a redo log, we saw how to manage a control file, what exactly control file has, and we read about archive log files, how to turn on the archive log, and all those things. So after that, we saw how to create a table space in the last class. A table space is nothing but a container for all the objects, right? Logical container. And we saw how to add data files to it, how to remove data files, how to increase the size, how to reduce the size, all those things. We learned about what are different kinds of table space we had. So all that is done right now until now. So today what we are going to learn about is about users. So if you have a database and there are no users created to access that database, then that database is of no, it's not really solving your purpose. Basically, database is has the data in it, and to access the data, you need to have somebody connecting to the database, either the application or a third-party user or customers of a company who want to access the data. To put in simpler terms, if you have a bank website and nobody is able to connect to that bank website, then there is no point of having that website, right? You can have a small application which is just internal to the company will not get funds to run their business and everything. So that is why the users are created on the database. Now, these users can be of two types. One is the customers or the external users, like we ourselves connecting to any of the website in this world, where we enter the user ID password that goes and authenticates our password somewhere in the database, and it makes sure we are entering correct password and it lets us log in. So we are users. Second type of user would be a user which is from the application. For example, uh, um, what we can say example is, if there is for example, if we consider Amazon application, then there might be many internal smaller applications on the Amazon website which help us to do that whole ordering process, easy one. Internally, there might be user accounts who have been assigned a smaller task, like moving the when you click add to cart, moving that object uh, into your cart might be taken care by a smaller part of the application. So those things, right? So two types of users: one is we from the external world, not inside the company; other one is which sits inside the application. So both the users can be created the same way, like we create the normal same way for creating a user in the database. In the database, there are two more concepts, which is called as a user and a schema. A user is basically user ID and password combination which lets you get into the database. Now, when you get into the database, if you want to create an object, like if you want to create a table to store some information in there, now let us consider the example of a application user, right? So application is connecting to the database and application is creating some objects in there, like tables to store some data. Probably it is creating a table like employee table to store all the employee related information in that table. Where will it create that uh, uh, objects in? So there should be a container in which the objects can go and sit in. So this container is called as a schema. Okay, what is the schema? A schema is a collection of all objects that is owned by a specific user. So if you create a user called Dev, then internally there will be a schema which will be created with the same name called Dev, and whatever I create with that login, the objects will fall into that logical container, right? So by default, when a database is created, two schemas are or two important users are created by default, which is sys user and system user. So this sys user is the same user which you use to log into the database. So when you do the SQL plus slash sys dba, sorry, I did not source the environment. Right. When I do show user, it will show me with what user I have logged in. It is a sys user, right? So this user by default it's created when we create the database, because this is a super user, and all the connection a DBA can make to the database is through a sys user. Similarly, there is a system user also. Again, system user will have its own password, and you can use the password and log into the database. So the sys and system users have access to everything in the database. They are like a super users, right? So if I create a user called Dave, and user Dave creates 10 objects in the database, sys and system user will have access to all those 10 objects. But user Dave will not have access to objects owned by sys system. Or if I create another user, which is say let's say user ABC, they will not have access to users the objects created by ABC, and ABC will not have access to the objects created by Dev, right? So for example, if this is the schema which is created by Dev, and we have like table 1, index 1, Dev. Okay, and let's say user ABC. Okay, and this is table X, index Y, view Z. Okay, these objects are there in this schema. So this is my username Dev, username ABC. So when I created this users Dev and ABC, it created a schema in it to store that information. Now they've created table 1 and index 1, and ABC created table X, index Y, and view called as Z, right? So just to have that in security purpose, Dev cannot access the objects created by ABC. If Dev has to access objects created by ABC, there is something else has to be done. Okay, we'll see that later today. And ABC will not, by default, will not have access to the objects owned by Dev. But user sys and system will have access to all the objects created by Dev, all the objects created by ABC. Everything in this database, sys and system user will have access. That is why sys user is only used and system user is only used by DBAs. You are not supposed to share the password of the sys and system user. If you share the password with somebody other than DBA, then you are going to end up in trouble someday, right? So there will be audits running in the company to check who all is using this sys account, system account. If they figure out someone is using this one and that person is not a DBA, then the fun starts. Everything rolls down to the DBA, because DBA is the owner of this one. So it's your responsibility that you don't share this passwords to anybody. There are a few companies where even the SQL plus slash sys DBA, this kind of login, even this is kind of prohibited. So they will create your own user like they was created, and they will give a privilege which will let you do the same work as you can do as a SQL plus slash sys DBA. What's the benefit of that one? Anything happened, anytime somebody dropped the table, somebody dropped the database, something happened, it can be backtracked to that particular login which was used to log into the database. That is called as a auditing, which runs on the backend of the database. Okay. So sys and system user, super users do not share the password. Okay. So sys user, when it's created, now database creates the user. So if you want to log in with that user, how will you log in? So what Oracle said, right? Okay, we'll create the user and we'll set a default password to the sys and system user. Default password for sys user is change underscore on underscore install. And default password for sys user is change underscore on underscore install. And for system user is manager. Okay. So as a DBA, once you create a new database, it becomes your responsibility to change this password of sys and system user. If you don't, you are basically letting anybody connect to your database with that user account. This is wide known. If you just Google on do a search on Google, what is the default password for sys, you'll find this one. This is there in Oracle documents itself. So everybody, whoever is trying to access the database, if they do a little bit of research, they can find that password. But is a DBA effective enough to make sure that kind of logins do not happen? It depends on how efficiently you have managed to remember this and reset the password of sys and system accounts, right? Whatever you can do, you do, but just safeguard these two users, not let anybody log in with that users. Okay. Now, other than sys and system, if you want to create another set of users, then this is the syntax. So this is a little bit big syntax. This has all possible options you can give while creating a user, but you can use a smaller syntax also. So let's try to create a user called Dave in our database. So it would be create user, then the username, what username you want to give. I'll say Dave, identified by password. So what password you want to give here? Say I will say Oracle 12. Okay. You remember yesterday I told you for temporary table space you have to mention the default table space. So similarly for storing the data, storing the objects created by user Dave, you have two options at this point. Either you can create a new table space for user Dave and create the user in such a way that all the objects created by Dave will go into the default table space. All right. Or else you can use the users table space, which is created when the database is created, right? When database is created, 5 table spaces are created. Sys, system, do not, system, sysocs, users, temporary, and undo. So 5 table spaces are created. In that, you can use the users table space by default. But assume a company which has hundreds of DBAs or hundreds of user accounts created. All users are dumping the data in the users table space. Now, how much messed up that table space will become? So it's kind of organizing your home or your room, right? Similarly, the database is yours. You are the DBA. So how well can you organize that database? How much planning can you make so that things get easier for you to handle? You don't want to end up in a situation where for all users you gave user stable space and suddenly there was a finding where user stable space has grown to terabytes and they are asking you to segregate those tables from the user stable space to any other table space. In that case, you have to figure out what all objects exist in the user stable space, narrow down this object, who owns this object, how do we move that object from user stable space to new table space, all the headache. So instead of all those, make sure while you are creating a new user, try to give it a new table space. Okay. So since we want a new table space now, what I will do is I will go ahead and create a table space also, which we did not do yesterday. I kept it pending for this one only. Okay. So create table space syntax is easy. You can also find this on Oracle documents online. So create table space, I will say I can keep the same name as username, or generally what people do is they keep the same username but underscore data, something like this table space name. So that way I know this table space is used by this user Dave, and it is used to save some data in it, right? And data file, let me see what are the location of my data file. Select name from dba underscore data underscore files. I think file name from. See, even now also I kind of end up doing mistakes. There's so many tables, so many columns in it. You will make mistakes. That is fine. Nothing to worry. You learn by your mistakes. So I'm creating in the same location, and I'll say just Dave01 dot tbf, and I will give 50 MB size. Okay. So first I create a table space for that user. So again, while creating this table space, if you are installing if you are creating a database specific for a application, again that application document will have this information like what they want you to name the table space with, and how much size should be the table space, and what names of the data files. Names of data files is optional, but what name of table space, what size of table space, that will be in the document. If it's not there, then you are your own master. You can name it the way you want, or you can talk to your application team and come up with a name. So here, now I created the table space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it default table space equal to the table space which I created. Okay. And all these are, the square bracket is one option, like temporary table space, you have to replace the table space name. Account, either you can create the account in a locked fashion or unlocked fashion. You can give any profile or default profile. We'll learn what is profiles. You want the password to expire or not expire. When we say password to expire, basically what it means is uh, when the application team or the new user logs in with that password, then it will let them log in for the first time. Then it will say like you have to reset your password. You would have seen this feature in few of the websites where you will get a default password. You enter the username, the default password, and then you log in, and then it says reset the password now. It does not let you proceed further. It will say reset the password first, then you log in with the new password and proceed further. So same kind of technology, because a DBA creates the username and password. So DBA by default knows the password, and DBA can use that account for some reason, we don't know. So to safeguard that user's account, we force them to reset the password. I'll show you how that works. Okay, so for now default table space is Dave underscore data, and default temporary table space, I will use the same temporary table space. For table space information, dba underscore table spaces. This gave me a lot of information. Okay, select table space underscore name from dba underscore table spaces. Okay, so this is my temporary table space. I'm using the default one. Remember, there'll be, I mean, if you don't use the temporary table space, all your temporary calculations done by user Dave will happen in system table space. All right. So either I can put this option or I can remove it. That's fine. I'll remove the profile also. and I'll put the password expire just to show you how that feature let asks you to. There's a bracket missing, confusing. So quota is a feature where you specify like how much of space to assign every in incremental way. Like first it will assign 10 kilobytes as given 10K, and then it will let it increase in incremental fashion, like 10K at a time. So I'm creating this user Dave here. Okay, here identified by, forgot that by. So it does not like that username. What I will do is I'll put webmaster, just for example, right? Invalid common user or role name. Oh, okay. Just a minute. All right. So looks like what is happening here is um, this is a CDB PDB. So we need to create that user in the PDB. I will teach you what are these PDBs and CDBs. But for now, we will create the user in PDB. So it is just complaining that the data file already exists. I'm just giving a different data file. Okay, so I created the table space in the PDB. PDB is like a database inside a database. Just for your reference for now, we'll see that details later on. But it's basically database inside a database. Okay, so I created the table space. Now let me create the user. Okay, all right. Dave underscore data one, and I will make this Dave itself. Okay, finally. So create user, username identified by the password, default table space, here the table space which you created, temporary table space temp, password expire. Okay, now I created this user Dave, and Dave is the new person, new DBA or the user who has joined the company. And there was a request for me to create a user, so I have created. Now I share this password to that guy, and he tries to log in. So he says, how does he try to log in? SQL plus Dave slash Oracle 12. Just a minute. So you will say SQL plus Dave slash Oracle 12 at the rate of RCL PDB. So now it's authenticating the password inside the database, and let us see if it lets us log in. It is too much time to log in. Let us see what's happening. So let it log in. I think I know why it's taking time. I'll come to that point. So we created a user now, right? So if you have any request to change the password of a user, you can modify that password for the user. How do you modify the password for a user? Using something called as a alter user command. The command would be say as simple as, I'll write down the commands once we fix that login issue. We will change the password. So alter user Dave identified by, say instead of Oracle 12, I'm giving Falcon 12 account unlock. So this would be the syntax for changing the password. So alter user, which user you need to alter, and what is the password you want, the new password you want to give to reset the password of that user. So similarly, like we change the password, we can change the default table space also, and default temporary table space also for the user. So those would be the modifications which you can do on the user. Like you create the user, you can drop the user also. So this would be the drop uh, this would be the drop user command. So drop user username. Now this one cascade is put into the bracket again. Like while you are dropping the table space, you can only drop the table space and leave the data files, right? Same way, while dropping the user, you can drop the user, but you can leave the objects intact in the database. Now that might create a problem going further when we figure out database size has not reduced even after cleaning up so many things. Then you know that you just drop the user, but the objects are left inside the database. So when you're dropping the user, you always do drop user username cascade option. And these two tables will help you to get the information about the uh, objects which are owned by the users, created by the user, and what dependencies we have. Okay. So next is something called as the privileges. Let's pause here for now.